Two couples come together to have a somewhat of a discussion or a negotiation. Their children, their two boys, have gotten into a fight in the park, and one boy hits the other boy in the mouth with a stick and breaks his teeth. And they're all polite people. They're all well-educated, older parents, and they've all, come from upper middle class families, and they live in a very, very polite and urban suburb, and you would think that this would all go very well, and it all just goes very badly. I hadn't seen the play at all, and in fact I bought tickets to see the play, and I was working and I couldn't go, so I gave them to a friend. Unfortunately. I mean, actually I think that's kind of a good thing, to have never seen the play. Or hopefully you're not terribly intimidated, which I'm intimidated anyway, so but I'm sure I would have been more intimidated had I seen it. I think it's a comedy of people's manners and how how they lose those manners. And I will say, I mean, it's the thing that really makes it work is that each character is so well drawn, and they're all very, very different. It does sort of underline the fragility of the relationships and how fraught we all are with all of the wounds that we drag along with us throughout of our relationships with our children, our relationships with our parents, and those things play out within every piece of dialogue that we have. I mean, it's so beautifully written, this play, and it's dizzying. So it starts out in this kind of polite way, and then very quickly it starts gaining momentum and gaining momentum and gaining momentum until it becomes a real rapid fire. But I think Carnage, shortening it to Carnage, which I think is going to happen on this film, I think it is an interesting idea. It allows you to discover within the story, what that meant. But I think it gives it this primitive feeling in a much more primitive way. And I think that's really what the movie's about, is about all of these, polite people kind of finding their more primitive side. Well, it's the ideas that are in it that I think are the most interesting, and the relationship between the people that are even as satirical as it is, and in some ways as outlandish as they are, have a real grounding in real psychology, family psychology. And it's that tapestry that I love the most, the details of people's lives and how they interact with each other and how they drive each other crazy, and all the old wounds, how they stab each other over and over again, not just in this generation, but in the next generation, the generation of the kids that came before, or the kids that are having a fight in the park, as well as the mother that Michael talks to on the phone. It's 2 hours into these people's lives, and 2 hours of them discussing and fighting about issues and things that they care about. And maybe that is the great challenge, I think, is to shoot a film in real time. Shooting a film in real time, where there's not even a moment where you pass over the fact that somebody's goes and gets a broom out of the closet. I mean, you watch the person get the broom out of the closet, and that means that whatever transitions are being made, they're not being made off camera. They have to be made right then and there. And I think the play is so beautifully drawn that it's kind of been easy to go from one feeling to the next. I don't know if there's any hard and fast moral to the story. I think mostly it really is just about an experience of watching people become their more primitive selves and reveal themselves in a truer way. All these people who are being so phony. At the beginning, when we first started the film, we were shooting in chronological order. I think Roman's directions to everybody was just more phony, more phony, more phony, more phony. Could you be more fake? And I think that, that's really where they start out in the process. They start out saying, I'm so sorry, and, what can we do to help? And, oh, don't worry, it's all fine, this happens. And little by little, it devolves into the real feelings that are behind it. Our ideas about morality are really constructs. And that, in fact, we're all very primitive, and that, we're all monstrous in some ways. And that if we probably took responsibility for that, we'd probably be better off and happier. This is what couples go through every single day of their lives. I mean, this is the undercurrent of what people go through every single day of their lives. I make movies about families. As a director, I make movies about families and couples all the time, and that really is my fascination, my obsession, how this tapestry comes together and how all of these dynamics come together in a positive and negative way. And that's what intimacy is. If you want to be intimate with somebody, it gets really ugly. Well, it is a French play, and the transposition has been done many times in different languages. The English transposition is very different from the American because, of course, couples in London, not only do they speak differently, but they have a different set of circumstances than a couple does in Brooklyn. So the transposition from Paris to Brooklyn is a huge one, and I think Roman's handled that beautifully with Yasmina. I think he's really managed to capture that essence of a Brooklyn couple. They're richer people, and they're people that are exposed to lots of things that other Americans aren't exposed to. And they make a decision to live in Brooklyn, not in New York City, but in Brooklyn. And Brooklyn has become kind of the yuppie place for people that have been really exposed to Manhattan culture. These are older couples. These are not people that had kids in their 20s. So these are people that made decisions to have kids, in their 40s. And that means you have a very different investment than when you're younger. It's a very different investment. In terms of how they relate, I mean, the French play in some ways is very much like Parisians. They relate all through language, and it's very much all about like how they all play with language. Well, that's very French. See, we don't do that as much in America, and there were a lot of changes that had to be made so that some of the dialogue really reflected the interior of the character and less their tongues. It was less about the barbs that they sent and more about their interiors. I'd like to say that the play is incredibly universal, but it's universal to people of a certain socioeconomic background. These are people who are traveled, they're people who are rich, they're people who, buy clothes at designers that are Italian and German and all sorts of other things. So that being said, there's a similarity between Paris and London and Rome and Brooklyn, I mean, there's a similarity between those people that are raising couples, yuppies, raising couples with a lot of money. I think we're starting to feel a little bit claustrophobic on week 6. We're ready to get out of the studio, but I've made a lot of movies in one location like this. I don't know, maybe it's helpful. The one thing that's happened when you do a film where there's only 4 people and all there is talking, is that there's a closeness that develops between the actors that you just can't get any other way. And I don't know if it's because we're all desperate or because we're all really great people, but I have to say, this has been the most enjoyable camaraderie that I've ever had in a movie. I genuinely love these actors so much, and I'm actually already sad about not seeing them every single day. I mean, we really, really, really love each other, and I think it really shows on screen when we're scratching each other's eyes out. They came to me with the role. So Penelope, who was Veronica in the play, it seemed like a very good fit. She's incredibly serious and takes everything way too seriously and is very politically correct. And in the beginning, in a way, you can play that normally in a sort of dramatic way. And then as time goes on, it becomes more and more of a satire of a regular person. I am an uptight woman who works at a bookstore, but who's writing a book on suffering in Africa, and can't seem to get that out of her mind. And she's almost like a human rights court. She wants to do the same thing and is appalled by these 2 people that have come into her home that she feels over and over again by everything that they say and that they demonstrate just don't seem to care at the plight of the world and how terrible this circumstance is. John C. Reilly, who plays Michael, his relationship with me is that he's just a good guy, and he, listens to me, but he's trying to make peace, and he kind of thinks that my uptightness is just a little too much, and the way he avoids that is by drinking his favorite scotch. Yeah. Well, Roman has been a filmmaker for a very long time, and he knows everything. He's a master technician, and he's a master filmmaker, and he has a very specific style. And lots of directors have many different styles, and they kind of jump back from one to the other, and they all have a different style for each film they do, and each type of storytelling. But Roman doesn't. I mean, he's very consistent about what he wants, and the way he does that is that he makes every single decision himself. So he very often puts the marks down, and he very often, he sets the camera, and he's there with his little viewfinder, which I haven't seen anyone use a viewfinder in about 20 years. And his is all scratched, just from like Knife in the Water. He has an idea of the look that he wants for the movie, but that is also a part of his lexicon too. And another director could come in and make a totally different film, and would make a film that would be completely different. So it's been interesting to see his style really take form on this film. I think it's been interesting for him to work with 4 actors that have also been around for an incredibly long time and have made a lot of movies. I've directed movies, Christoph's directed a film, John's produced films, and Kate's pretty much done everything on the planet that any human being could possibly do right, And I think it's been fun for him because he realizes it's easier for him. That in some ways, most of the direction that he had to do was in rehearsals, and that there's very little acting direction to be done once the film starts shooting. So most of his concerns are really visual concerns about how the camera, what the camera angles are and how to move things around, and then very, very subtle tweaks for us. But he made his play before the film started and sort of told us the direction that he was looking for, and then he doesn't really have to work too hard with us after that.